Hi everyone, I'm David Brommer and welcome to B&H's panel discussion on the new Sony a7R Mark II. We're extremely excited to have the following professionals with us today. We have Colby Brown, he's a photographer, a photo educator, and author specializing in landscape, travel, and humanitarian photography. Additionally, Colby is a Sony Artistan and has taught workshops on landscape photography for National Geographic and is also the founder of The Giving Lens. We have Daniel Watson joining us. He is a videographer and photographer specializing in weddings and portraits. He is also the founder of LearningCameras.com, an educational resource for photographers and videographers offering news, training, and gear reviews. Welcome. And to round this out, we have Kenta Honjo. He is a Sony product manager and expert. He's been working with Sony since 2007, starting as a mechanical engineer, and is here today as our expert technical reference for the Sony a7R II.
Thank you.
Sort of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi of Sony. Yes. So the new a7R II has recently become available to the public, and it's also purchasable here at B&H Photo. What a coincidence. So I want to welcome everyone once again to our panel discussion. And we will be talking pretty much exclusively about the Sony R7 Mark II. However, Sony did have some other releases, which Dan, you did a story on, which will be coming up on the...
Yes, the RX100 review is out already, and the RX10 will be coming up.
Yeah, that's the R100 Mark IV.
Yes, yes.
And then the RX10 Mark II.
Mark II, correct.
Can we say this 5 times really quickly? Okay, so your review on the RX10 Mark II is coming out.
Yes.
Okay. Which by the way, I tested that camera, the first version extensively. I love it. Possibly the ultimate travel camera.
Yep.
So just to get in touch with the a7R Mark II, we've got an amazing video from Sony. So let's roll that video. Wow, that's a camera. It pretty much does everything. So speaking of everything, we want to make an announcement about social media. If you could tweet #BHPhotoLive with your questions. We have staff that'll be answering the questions. Maybe we'll also answer some questions right here. That's at #BHPhotoLive. And then we've got a very special giveaway, and trust me, you're going to want to play with this one. This is going to be tweet out a shout out or a question to #SonyAlpha. So that's #SonyAlpha for a giveaway at the end of the program we'll be giving. And by the way, you're going to want to stay for the whole program to see what we're giving away because it's pretty cool. These guys were fighting over it before. Okay, so I was fortunate enough, along with these gentlemen about a week ago, to get an a7R Mark II and put it through its test and trials. And I have to say that the camera was quite an amazing experience to work with. I want to share with you guys a couple of photos that I was able to work with the camera. If we could show those photos. And most of these were shot with the 90mm 2.8 macro lens. This was with the 28-70. That macro lens was superb.
It's such a nice lens, isn't it?
And I like how it doubles up as a portrait lens. This is a shot in the interior Hogs and Heifers, just testing out its low light ability with the 28-70. That backlit LED screen is amazing. And I love doing some portraits with that. Now, this camera isn't all still. Look at the bouquet in the background, that odd rider in the background. A little bit of a fine art application with it, shot at f/16. All right, now, it's not all still photography. This particular camera is pretty amazing. You can see you can milk out great still photographs with it, but its video is extremely advanced. So let's roll a 4K video with the camera. Wow, 4K video. That's pretty amazing. I don't know if our computers at home can do that justice, but you get one of those awesome Sony monitors, it's going to be pretty incredible. Would like to take a Facebook question now from our audience out there. This is from Keel Bujitsu McDonald. He says, I already have a mirrorless, but like to see and hear about what's going on in the gear world. Would you say this is a major improvement over the previous model, or is it a small step in a much longer road for Sony? Kenta, care to take one?
Yeah, sure. If you've been following Sony's announcement recently, it's nothing, but it's everything. These are revolutionary products that we're doing. So we start off with the A7 series with the A7 and the A7R. Extraordinary cameras. They were the first, lightest interchangeable lens cameras with full frame sensors in it, right? And then we came out with the A7S, extraordinary low light capabilities, and the A7 Mark II, which added 5-axis image stabilization in the body. And then now, with the A7R Mark II, we combine all the good stuff of those predecessors into one camera. So the short answer is, yes, this is a revolutionary camera.
So I think what's pretty cool is that this camera system basically started 2 years ago.
Right.
And you've got a number of models that's making these big improvements. But A7R2 is a significant step forward.
It's a huge step, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you also, looking at the A7R, it was a great camera, but like every camera, no camera's perfect. And so there was a few shortcomings. Autofocus wasn't nearly as good as the A7 or compared to the A7S, which came after it. And with the A7R2, it's really interesting to see all of the small little quirks that came with the original version to essentially be not only fixed, but essentially almost taken to the next level in terms of autofocus, image stabilization, ISO performance when you're mixing that with resolution. It's a lot of, all of it kind of coming together was really nice in a nice little package.
And it's the first ever to offer internal 4K recording.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
And a lot of this is enabled by the sensor. So the sensor is really special in this camera. It's 42 megapixels, as everyone knows, but it's also back-sided illuminated. The first time ever that we've been able to do for a full-frame sensor. And back-sided illuminated sensors differ than conventional sensor technology, because typically you would have to balance between resolution and sensitivity, right? But with a back-sided illuminated sensor like this, you can keep the resolution very high and also the sensitivity very high. So you get the best of both worlds.
Aside from this amazing technology, I want to bring it to that Sony listens.
Right.
And there was a lot of feedback from photographers and videographers on what they want. And you as a company are able to react very fast and get these features into a camera, develop them, bring them through R&D, and then put them out to the market, which is pretty impressive.
Right. So it does go back to that question on Facebook. what we try to do is really excite photographers and videographers. What creates excitement is revolutionary cameras, revolutionary technology that enable and get the photographer and videographer to the next level. So that's what we try to do, and I think the a7R Mark II really delivers on that.
I think, as we move forward in this panel, you guys are really going to be the test bed for this and can show it. So, but there are some major new features that have been introduced on the camera. So let's go over the first and the biggest one. Aside from saying that sensor being backlit and allowing it to work better in low light, it's a 42 megapixel sensor.
Right. It's a huge, huge sensor, yeah. So the natural question is why 42 megapixels? There are plenty of cameras out there with higher megapixels, higher resolution.
Not that many, by the way.
Not that many. Yeah.
Some. There's a few.
Yes. But we got to that 42 megapixel resolution because we wanted to maximize three things, three variables. First is resolution. So we wanted to keep that very high. The second was sensitivity. But now with the new technology, with the backlit illuminated sensor, we were able to keep those relatively high. The third component I think most people overlook is the quality of 4K video, especially in the Super 35 or the 4K crop, Super 35 APS-C crop. So what we found was if we oversample at 50 megapixels in the Super 35 mode, we can get great quality out of the 4K video. So if we go from the Super 35 50 megapixels, then naturally you come to the 42.4 megapixels in full frame. So that's how we derive the...
It's a compromise, but one that actually worked to our favor.
Yes.
Interesting. That's a great way of designing it. What does 42.4 megapixel mean to you, Colby?
Well, as a landscape and travel photographer, I'm always trying to use the lightest setup as possible when I'm out traveling around the world. And sometimes that means that the lens that I have currently on, the lens and the body combination, is something I have to work with because the scene's happening, unfolding before my eyes. I don't always have the ability to switch lenses or change into, from a prime to a zoom lens. And so with 42 megapixels, even though we're only talking about 6 more megapixels, it still gives me a little bit extra reach in terms of being able to crop into my frame and really pick the composition that I want, which is really something I've only been able to do beforehand for the most part when it came to medium format cameras. And someone that's actually taken medium format cameras traveling around to crazy third developing worlds around the world, it's not feasible. So being able to do that in a small body is actually quite awesome to be able to have that cropping ability.
And the 42 megapixel, Dan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so in wedding portraits, we're all the time blowing up to 20 by 30s and even bigger, and being able to do that with 42 megapixels means that we're able to do almost a 300 DPI native print at that huge size. And also, going between horizontal and vertical happens all the time as well, and so being able to make those decisions after the fact and make those crops into it and not have to worry about the loss in quality, or being able to go as big later on in post, that's huge.
Okay, so just Colby, going back to your work, let's roll some of your images that you created with the camera. We could really explore 42.4 megapixels.
Well, as we talked about before, I was able to take the a7R II over the last 2 weeks and use it in a variety of situations around Colorado, my home state. And so here you can see a variety of the results. This image was taken with a 90mm macro of a sunflower almost getting ready to be in bloom, and really the detail you see is hard to ignore. I mean, everything around it is looking beautiful. The resolution is nice. The colors are great, and I was actually really happy with the results. It's such a nice combination, that 90mm macro and the a7R II. And this is actually another use of the a7R II. This is a portrait actually of my 4-year-old son. He turns 4 in 2 weeks. But using the 90mm macro as a portrait lens is really phenomenal because of the resolution and the bokeh that you get. So this was taken just after bath time one night, and I just asked him to make a nice smiley face, and really the results came out quite nice. And if you zoom into it, like the detail around the eye and the iris is insane. And then also mixing the a7R II around using telephoto lenses and using adapters. This was taken with the Sony Alpha 70-400. Really being able to zoom in and take advantage of autofocus and get in and crop in on your subject. This is a beautiful tiger at a wildlife sanctuary just outside Denver, Colorado. And as you can see, this wasn't possible really with the first generation A7R because the autofocus didn't work nearly as well. So, I also experimented a little bit with some landscapes. So this is taken at a lake not too far from my house. and really being able to show off the dynamic range of the shots, what you're able to do, being able to pull down those highlights, pull up those shadows, and using something like ISO 100 in order to really expand the most amount of dynamic range with a given shot. So.
Beautiful shot, by the way.
Thank you very much. And then here's something actually I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but this image was taken with a telephoto lens, but it was actually with a Canon 100 to 400 using the Metabones adapter, which was a really nice combination to be able to take advantage of that autofocus system for those that might be migrating systems to be able to come over to Sony and ultimately want to use the full FE lineup, but that might have to use some of the lenses they have currently in order to make that migration possible. So. And then here, lastly, we have an image that is a high ISO test. I really wanted to see what the capabilities of the a7R2 is. So this was taken at ISO 3200 as the light was fading on the top of Mount Evans up in Colorado, and just really seeing how much range is being pulled into the shot using a long exposure.
The dynamic range is amazing on that.
Yeah, it's really nice seeing what you're capable of doing with this lens. And then here we go, we have another shot of another test for the dynamic range. This was taken at sunset, again on one of the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. And really, again, pulling up those shadows, finding the nice highlights and the balance, and then using a really low ISO to really, again, maximize that dynamic range that makes the A7R series so predominant and so attractive to a lot of landscape photographers.
Some other advantages that the cameras come down with, some other really important features are the in-body image stabilization, which is pretty cool because in the past you had to buy a lens with a stabilizer. You found yourself spending extra money and buying a lot of lenses. Now it's built in, which I can imagine on the wide angle side, you could probably get down to a really low shooting ability. Dan, when you're shooting your weddings, how is that stabilizer helping out? And
yeah, being able to use primes now with image stabilization is something that's changed massively, because even though we've had it in most of our zooms, we've never had it in prime lenses. And so, especially with video too, being able to handhold some of those wider angle lenses and being able to use them on gimbals as well with that stabilization built into the camera and not have to worry about what lens it is or whether the lens has stabilization or not. So that's key.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you look back at, the images we just looked at, so the portrait I took of my son, like that was in really, really low light. I can't remember offhand, but I believe it was like 1/15th or 1/5 of a second. Now I'm using
With
the
the
90
90.
millimeter macro that has its own stabilization in it, working with the 5-axis stabilization. So you're really maximizing all of that, the stabilization features using the FE native lens lineup, which is really nice. And so I was able to take that shot, which I probably wouldn't have otherwise if I didn't have that specific
are
combination.
you saying you were able to double stabilize that? The
Well,
stabilizer works in
Kenta can
concert
talk
with
probably
the...
a little bit more talking about how the stabilization works, but utilizing the FE lenses, you're able to maximize essentially all the features of the A7 cameras, including
Yeah,
autofocus.
that's a really important point because we had the A7 Mark II with image stabilization, but it only had 24 megapixels, right? So if you compare a 24 megapixel full frame sensor and a 42.4 megapixel sensor, even if you have the same shake, you're going to see it more in the higher resolution camera. So it's even more critical to have image stabilization built in. And then if you want to really focus in onto that eye when you're doing portraits, image stabilization is essential. You can't live without it.
Yeah.
So there's a rule in photography that says whatever focal length you have to have in shutter speed.
Right.
So shooting with the 90th of a second, you should be shooting at 100th or
100th of a second,
125th of a
right.
second. Stabilizers will let you beat that by 3 to 4 stops.
Maximum, 4.5,
Yeah,
It
depending
depends
on
on
the lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're using telephoto, obviously it's going to be more obvious for the shake that you have. But the wider you go, I mean, I've seen some amazing results from some other photographers utilizing both the A7 II and the A7R II for the 5-axis image stabilization to have use the 16 to 35 f4 to be able to shoot at ridiculously low shutter speeds. As long as their subject is still, they can still come off with pretty amazing and sharp images.
So I think the takeaway is that tripods are very 2014.
I'm sure it helps keep your lenses a little bit lighter and narrower.
Yes.
Okay, this is a really big one on this camera, which amazed me because I'm quite old. I worked in a camera store in the mid-'80s. I think it was at JCPenney. It was when the Minolta Maxim 7000 first came out. It was the first autofocus SLR that was commercially available. And I remember holding up that camera and focusing, and it would wee in one direction and then hunt the other direction. But in 1985, it was amazing.
Right.
This camera's 399 autofocus points. this is a first for Sony. This is its highest performing autofocus camera. Do you care to elaborate on that?
Sure,
for us?
yeah. So we have 399 points, as you mentioned. I think the highest number of phase detection AF points in an interchangeable lens camera. We also have very wide coverage, and I know in our previous conversation that's really important for videographers and photographers. So it's covering about 45% of the entire frame, which is amazing. So if you look through it and see all the green dots dancing about, it's just an exciting moment.
I don't trust autofocus.
Okay.
But when I first unpacked the camera and started playing with it, I noticed quickly how intelligent it was. Putting subjects off center, it would just it would nail them right over. It was quite accurate.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it gives you more options, really. You know, to sit there and we talked about it before with a lot of the autofocus points in most cameras center around the very middle of your viewfinder, and that is relatively limiting because you're constantly trying to focus and then recompose and doing what you're doing. But with 45%, you have much more leeway in order to really take advantage of the system.
Yeah, you don't see that typical array of points. So you're just limited to every time you use a DSLR. And I mean, autofocus has been quick and fast and accurate for a little while now in those, but we've never had that. It's relative to how many points you have and they're spread in the frame, and you just never have that option of moving things around to the extreme corners.
Now, you're shooting people frequently. Have you used the iFocus?
Yes, so I use it a couple of times, and yes, it allows me to only take the picture when it has that eye and be able to lock on and give me that precision that I normally wouldn't have. And that's nice when you're using it with some of your wider aperture lenses as well.
So let's take a look at some of your work, Daniel.
Sure.
And let's roll Dan's images. Gorgeous. Wow.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. I noticed the difference between a videographer and a photographer. You have the kind of Ken Burns going on there.
We got to keep
Just
everything
handle-
moving.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, a lot of those, the shots that you had with the 90mm
Yes.
really, again, shows just how awesome that combination is. When I first got the 90mm lens a couple weeks ago, and even before the a7RII came out, I was just blown away by just how sharp you're able to utilize it, and then the fact that you can adjust between autofocus and manual
Yep.
so easily on the focus ring
Right on the
itself. Makes our lives easier for situations like that where you're focusing on that dragonfly
Yep.
and really trying to get the right point, that right focal plane just for their eye.
Yeah, and that was actually with autofocus.
Nice. Okay.
Which
Awesome.
Typically, I've never done
I'm
before.
impressed.
So, Dave, you've also got an extensive, you have a video about the video system.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to roll that down and just showcase a little bit about the video.
Yeah, and let me do say as well that you can download the full resolution in 4K without any kind of YouTube compression or anything like that. So don't worry about the compression. You can download that at learningcameras.com, so you can actually view the capabilities of the camera delivering in 4K.
Okay, let's roll that video.
We're definitely going to talk about video because somehow Sony managed to blow away expectations without sacrificing the performance for photographers. And we now have 4K recording using Sony's XAVC-S codec, which gives you up to 100 megabits per second at a full pixel readout for both full frame and with a 35mm crop. Combine that with the other video features such as manual audio control, headphone output, focus peaking, zebras, S-Log 2, and so much more. It really is an amazing camera for video use. High frame rate recording would probably be the only feature that doesn't push the envelope, so we're stuck with the standard but still pretty amazing 60 frames a second at 1080p, 120 frames per second at 720p. In a new twist, Sony has actually built in image stabilization into the camera body, allowing full 5-axis stabilization with your fast prime lenses. Video quality itself is simply amazing. I mean, rolling shutter is still there, but it didn't seem as bad to me, maybe because of faster readout, and watching the results on my 4K TV was simply breathtaking. With the dual record functionality, the a7RII is going to record your high-quality XAVC files along with a low-quality MP4 at 720p to allow you to view your video on computers that may not handle 4K or for a fast web upload. If I ever have one camera to put in my bag, the a7R Mark II is definitely going to be the camera that's there. So again, don't trust me for it. Take a look at the website and download those full resolution JPEGs and RAW files, as well as the video montage that I put together, and take a look at that and look at the results, and I think that you're going to like what you see.
Makes me want to say I'm not a still photographer anymore. I'm into video. Pretty cool. So when I unpacked the camera came to me a week ago. When I unpacked it out of the box, the first thing that struck me was the heft, the fit and the finish of the camera. This is definitely a far cry from the original A7. It's been constructed amazingly well. Do you care to elaborate on that, Kenta?
Yeah. So it's a reflection of product planning and how we operate. We value customer feedback. So when we first launched the A7, our main goal was to announce a camera that was the smallest form factor with interchangeable lens and also full frame. So that was a revolutionary feat with the A7. However, the feedback that we got was people didn't like the grip. They wanted a beefier grip, you know. And what we learned was size and portability, that's important, but functionality is much more important, right? So as working photographers, and working videographers, we had to change the design a little bit to accommodate those voices. So that's reflected here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it feels like a really nice improvement over the first one. I mean, I have big hands. I'm a pretty decent sized guy, and holding the first generation, it definitely felt a little bit small. And the finish, the construction, the new magnesium body definitely feels more solid. And so even though the new version, like with mirrorless in general, the idea is that you kind of want to go lighter. That's why a lot of photographers are moving to mirrorless. The trade-offs for adding a little bit of weight and adding a little bit of girth really help with the grip itself and being able to really feel like it's comfortable. Like you're using a camera that you feel can, at least for me, I work in extreme environments, can take a little bit of a beating and can feel solid regardless of what I'm using, while still saving me weight compared to the old digital SLRs I used to carry around, schlepping all over the world,
right.
Depending on where I was at.
And I like that if you use a battery grip as well, it really extends the grip, as you can see, all the way down to the bottom. So if you're using it with these 70 to 200s, that can get really a lot of weight on the front of the camera.
Sure.
And having the extra grip all the way down to the bottom for your last two fingers is really going to make a difference when trying to balance it with those larger, heavier lenses.
Right.
But if you do have small hands, or you want to
If you want to go light and portable with this thing, you can go really light and portable.
Yeah, a low-profile travel rig. I mean, that's going to fit in any camera bag.
Which is unbelievable for a full-frame camera.
And also full frame and mirrorless. This is practically the size of most of the mirrorless cameras that are on the market,
Yes.
but sports the full frame.
Right.
Right.
So, and some of the full frame, some of the benefits there is we like using our telephoto lenses and getting some beautiful soft bokeh, and that's the larger sensor definitely facilitates that better than smaller
well, you
sensors.
get to go wider. The bokeh is nicer. The detail per pixel is more because you're working with with a larger sensor in essence. And so yeah, all around it's a nice setup for a lot of people. Full frame just makes the most sense for a lot of challenging situations out there.
Now, how do we like the sound of that shutter?
It is drastically improved.
Yeah.
I think the one complaint from a lot of photographers, a lot of my followers out there, and certainly myself, especially with the A7R, was the first one sounded like it was like metal on metal. It was like a big clank.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, especially for wedding photographers, it's very distracting.
Yep.
Right.
And so with the new version, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 50% reduced in terms of how much shutter vibration actually comes out of it, and then you also have the silent mode, which is new specifically to the A7R line. So essentially, you can make it sound like you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I
You're
use
still
that quite a
capturing
bit.
images.
Yeah, you can make it completely silent with anything you shoot on that.
Yeah, there was, with the first generation there, with the A7R, there was some of that shutter shock, talk out there where certain telephoto lenses at certain lengths using certain speeds would cause the vibrations a little bit, causing some images to blur, and that is no longer an issue. Not only with shooting it regular without silent mode,
Sure.
but having the ability to shoot silent mode when you really have to do a really long telephoto, you're taking pictures in Iceland or wherever you're at, it's no longer an issue.
Yeah.
It's essentially been taken off the list.
All those reasons are great, but it just sounds better.
Yeah.
That's what I'll take. Could we go into silent mode? Could you
Sure,
show
yeah.
silent mode?
Hit that function button right there,
Oh,
and I've got
that's
to shortcut it on the top and the right.
Perfect. It's right there. So I'm going to turn it on. There you go.
All right.
You wouldn't
We're
even know.
taking
Yeah, we're
photos
taking
right now.
a million
Wow.
photos right now.
It's completely silent.
That's
Yeah.
insane. There used to be a camera that another company that started with an M, their M line of cameras. Like it. But this is it's taking photographs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it helps because the lens is also silent too.
Yep.
You won't hear the autofocusing because we make these lenses for videographers as well. So naturally all of our FE lenses are all silent.
Boy, the film cinematographers are going to love this. This is
It's
going to
amazing.
be the camera for shooting on sets.
Right.
That's incredible. Now, when you go to silent mode, what does it do? Does it slow the camera down a little bit?
Nope.
So you basically get the benefit of silence without any detriment.
Well, there is a caveat though. It does reduce down to 12 bits.
Yes.
The image file. Yes.
Okay. From 16 to 12 or
14.
14
14
to
to
12.
12. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to this autofocus system that's kind of revolutionary because that's incredibly important. And we have a video we're going to roll on Sony's autofocus system. So let's roll that video. With the purchase of this camera, you no longer can take out of focus pictures. Okay, I don't know if that's actually necessarily true. The views expressed in this video are. So, Colby, how about some real world application on that autofocus system?
Yeah, well, as we talked about before, the A7R didn't have the best autofocus system compared to the other A7 bodies out there and some of the competition. With the A7R II, not only do you have the 399 autofocus points and the 25 contrast focus points, but you also have the ability to use some third-party lenses that you didn't have the ability to before. Now, as a photographer, I mostly use FE lenses because I want the most value for it. We talked a little bit before about how the image stabilization works with those lenses together. But for a lot of photographers out there that are making the switch or thinking about making the switch to Sony, it's a hard sell to essentially say, hey, come spend $10,000 or $15,000 and completely switch your systems around. Now, with the migration process, you actually have the ability, for the most part, to use autofocus on a lot of third-party lenses. And in order to test that, what I did is I took a couple Canon lenses and used a Metabones adapter, which is one of a few different adapters out there that you can use specifically to use Canon lenses, and tested them. And the results were actually quite surprising, especially coming from the past A7 line. So actually, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of those.
Yeah, let's roll some pictures here.
So this image is a biker that was coming directly at me. I wasn't planning for it. I just turned and saw him. And with the biker coming straight at you, that is a very challenging situation for a lot of autofocus systems out there. And this was, I took a single shot and it nailed it right from the start. And so I was very surprised. Lateral movement is generally easier to handle than straight up and down. Right. And so it was very nice results. This was again with one of the Canon lenses. And so this was my dog Ella. She's a 8-month-old puppy. And I wanted to shoot her because I wanted to check out the autofocus system, especially the continual focus. This was using the Canon 24-70 with the Metabones adapter. And as you can see, the results were quite nice. It's very sharp, nice and focused. You're capturing the moment.
An 8-month-old dog?
8-month-old.
That's like super autofocus.
The results were quite surprising. Now, it's not as good as the FE lineup, but it definitely is pretty close. And this is another, this is actually my wife and our dog Ella running around. And this is showing a little bit more lateral movement. And again, with the ability for the autofocus, continual autofocus to track using third-party lenses, still was able to capture the shot that I was looking for and getting great results.
And that last shot was taken 5 frames per second.
Yes.
So it's tracking quite quickly.
All the way, yeah, exactly, going in. And like I said, this is the first time that you're able to do that with a Sony lens lineup. And I do want to, like I said, I wanted to iterate that the FE lineup, from my experience, has gotten the best overall results using the 90mm macro we talked about, 16-35, 24-70. but the ability for it to use third-party lenses and still maintain autofocus on many of the different models is a game changer.
Yeah, I think that really is a game changer. It just opens up so much to you. You can go into your camera bag that you've been reaching into for years and pull out some lenses that were
Exactly, and
from the past.
there's a few caveats where it doesn't work with all lenses out there. Nikon has an adapter supposedly coming out, but regardless, like I said, it's nice to have that migration ability so that not every photographer has to invest all that money.
So I think you've sort of answered half of this question, but from Facebook we have a question, Feng, and Feng asked, how fast is the autofocus using Metabones with Canon LEF lenses?
The caveat is that some of the older Canon lenses don't work with it. I believe it's lenses that are older than, is it 2006?
Yeah, 2006.
That makes sense. Okay, 2006 struggled a little bit, but I found that a lot of the other, especially the newer models, and I know you had a similar experience,
Yep.
all worked actually quite well. 24 to 72 I tested the 100 to 402, and I got good results in the middle, but near the end of the spectrum it didn't work. I don't know if that's a Metabones issue or what's going on, but it still was able to come away with some pretty impressive images. And I know you have some pretty awesome stuff that you came away with using your Canon as well.
Yeah, I used the Canon 7200 f2.8 and that one worked very well with it. As the only limitation would have been around the infinity focus,
Yeah.
but for most going back and forth of subjects, it helped autofocus just like it was a native lens.
Yeah, I found the one small caveat that I did, and I think you had the similar issue, is where I found when there was a very big difference between the focal planes of where you're going, it did take a second to struggle, where it was like, okay, where am I focusing? But if you had two subjects that were anywhere even remotely close to each other, say a tennis player or a soccer player is running at each other, it would snap on the 399 phase detection points would capture it right away. But so there is that caveat. It does work and work well, but it isn't perfect.
So we can actually show this and illustrate it. Dan, you shot a video of the Canon autofocus lenses on the A7R2.
Yes, using that same Metabones adapter and that Canon 7200.
Let's roll that video and take a look at that work.
What's up guys, Dan Watson, learningcameras.com, and I've got a Metabones adapter on the A7R Mark II, and I've got a Canon 7200 f2.8 IS2 on here, and I wanted to test the autofocus in a way that you can kind of try and see this as it's happening rather than just take my word for it, because the results are actually way better than I thought they would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a focus point here, and you can see as soon as I press the button, it focuses instantly. I'm going to move it, ready, set, go. So I want to show you I've got continuous focus now set on, and so with continuous focus on, you can see that this thing is tracking as I'm going through with absolutely zero issues at all. And yeah, I mean, I have no issues moving around the frame, and this thing is locking on my targets as I'm going through without even trying. So here we go. Let's do a quick tracking test right here. We've got a car coming by. And yeah, I mean, I had no issues locking focus on that. Everything seemed to go really well.
Wow, I wonder how that's going to work with my Kodak commercial Ektar 14-inch lens.
Good luck with that.
Well, it wasn't autofocus in the 1950s. It's not autofocus now. All right, so let's go to Facebook. Rick Scalf has a question for us, and this might be directed right towards you, Colby. I'm considering replacing my 5D Mark III with an A7R Mark II. I'm a landscape photographer. Do you see any downside, and which camera is better for low light sensitivity and noise? Thanks.
Good questions. I came from Canon. So I shot Canon for the first 6 years, and for the last few years, actually 7 years. In the last few years, I've been a Sony shooter. So I know full well the switch. And I would say, I mean, when I first moved over, the A7R2 wasn't out, and the A7R and the A7S was what I originally switched over to. And those gave me pretty good comparison between the two. I lost some of the autofocus capabilities of the Mark III compared to the A7R, the first generation. But nowadays, there really is no difference between the two. I mean, I find that the A7R2 has awesome autofocus. The 5-axis image stabilization is quite nice. With low light sensitivity, and what Sony's been doing with the sensors lately, especially compared to Canon, to me is very eye-opening. You know, I think Canon historically has had very good autofocus, and they do good work with a lot of things they do, but when it comes specifically to dynamic range, which is important for landscape photographers, Sony is really a step ahead. And if you actually look at the sensors between the A7R2 and the 5D Mark III, you're generally going to see a couple stops difference in terms of the details you're going to be able to pull out of the shadows and the highlights and just how overall the midtones and everything work together. And so I've been very, very excited about the Switch when I moved over and utilizing these systems. So for a direct answer for them, it's a simple answer. The ISO sensitivity is better. The autofocus system is going to be either better or on par for the most part. And then the dynamic range is just a step above.
Colby, that makes sense because we're talking about the 5D Mark III, which is like a 2-year-old camera,
For sure.
versus the A7R II, which is what, a 1-week-old camera. And definitely one thing with technology, photography has become increasingly technology-driven.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about landscape photography getting a better dynamic range. That's huge. Dynamic range is something that's very important to a photograph.
For sure.
I mean, I think that it's safe to say that Ansel Adams would be stoked for this camera.
For sure. Well, I mean, you go onto message boards and you go onto internet sites and you see a lot of people that sit there and they pixel peep and they're looking at all the detail and they're sitting there and saying, oh, you know, Ansel wouldn't have done this or wouldn't have done that. Like, the people that say that, unfortunately, don't know Ansel very well because he spent a lot of the time in the darkroom perfecting his images. And the reason the dynamic range and those things are so important is not only because your JPEG images coming out are going to look a little bit more in terms of having expanded dynamic range for your brightness and your shadows and your highlights, but for your raw files. And so for your raw files to be able to sit there and to pull out 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 stops and to really be able to have that shadow detail still there, when you compare that to a Canon or whatnot, especially with shadow detail, it's night and day. I mean, there's a lot of shadow noise issues that happens on a lot of the older Canon bodies. Or when I say older, you know, the 5D Mark III, which you really just don't get in the Sony sensors. And again, for landscape photographers, that's huge.
Yeah.
And what about wedding photographers, Dan?
Yeah, well, I have both of those cameras, so I've had a chance to put them to the test together, and I'd say where the difference is the most amazing is going to be below 800 ISO,
Yep.
where if you look in on the images, the Canon just has grain even at those lower ISOs, and the Sony is perfectly clean.
Yep.
There is nothing to that. And being able to take a raw file and take those shadows and just push them to 100% and still not see any additional grain in there, and being able to gather all of that detail that was previously lost in the shadows, be huge for a landscape photographer to be able to do. So, I mean, there's some amazing differences. And I didn't see it any worse above all the way up to 6400 ISO. They compared very well. But when you get below that 800 ISO, the differences are actually more astounding there because the images are just completely clean.
Well, as we briefly talked about, or I mentioned it a couple minutes ago, specifically looking at dynamic range and ISO, with the Sony a7R II, your max dynamic range is going to be at ISO 100. So as you go up in ISO, you do lose dynamic range, and that's for every camera system. With the a7R II, you get about 14 stops of dynamic range at ISO 100, around there at least. And so when you're able to utilize that with the mixture of either the lenses or all the other stuff that you're using for landscape or weddings or travel or whatnot, that's a huge difference. And so shooting at those low ISOs whenever you can will give you the most expanded dynamic range with this system.
Dan, are you getting into, when you're shooting weddings, in particular the ceremony, where you're not allowed to use flash?
Yes, it happens all the time. I never used a flash during a ceremony.
Do you use flash in general?
During the reception, sometimes we will. Sometimes during the portraits, but never during the ceremony if I can at all get around it.
Get the ambience, get the...
Yes. So I'm commonly at 6400 ISO even with wide aperture lenses. And so being able to shoot even those higher ISOs are very important to me. So that was one of the first things I tested. Now it is very clean at 3200 and still very usable at 6400. But at
It requires a little touch up at 64,
yeah.
but 32,
But 3200, I mean, you can use those files for anything.
I think, David, the point that you brought up, that it's technology driven right now, is point on, I think, and that's why Sony is really excelling, because we make all the components, right?
Yep.
And by components, I mean image sensor, the processor, the lenses. It's all in-house, you know. So we're able to bring the very best technology into our latest cameras. So we're able to offer these kind of very high, clean images and very high ISOs. You know.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that Sony actually makes about 60% of sensors for all cameras.
We
From
are
the
the
smartphones to these things, the tablets to everything.
That's correct. We are the #1 world's most manufactured sensor manufacturer out there. So.
I call unfair advantage. Sell off some of your divisions. Equal the playing ground. How can people keep up with you guys? I'm actually not it sort of bothers me that it's technology driven. because I believe it should be image driven, composition driven, and that part's easy. I mean, every camera can create a well composed image, so it sort of changes the game a little bit.
It does. Well, it changes it, but I think, I mean, if you look at, you look at any other art form, you look at advances in technology and how they are, like cameras, at the very end of the day, regardless of what camera you have, it's still a tool. It's an extension of the photographer and the artistic creation of what they're able to do. And the reality is that moving into the digital world and moving from digital SLRs to mirrorless is an evolutionary step that was required for us in order to move into utilizing specific types of features and functions.
Right.
And so it's really becoming an extension of all these features that allow us to expand our creativity. For myself, to be able to sit there and have a single body that allows me to do so much is pretty awesome compared to if I didn't have that ability.
Well, let's talk about your camera bags.
Yeah.
And Colby, your camera bag, how is this camera going to sit in your camera bag? What's it going to replace?
It's an interesting question and one I get quite a bit. Sony, as we talked about, did something really interesting when they first came out with the A7 lineup. They came out with multiple different series that were very specific or specialized depending on what they are. The A7S had ISO sensitivity, the A7R was resolution, the A7 kind of had autofocus. It was kind of a little bit of the jack of all trades, at least for the time. And what we have with the A7R2 is we're taking all of that information and compiling into the single body, as Kenta mentioned before. And for me, that means that instead of moving to mirrorless and jumping from a 5D Mark III and a Canon 1DX to myself, which initially was an A7R, and then maybe had an A7S and an A6000, where now I'm essentially running with two of these bodies and a few of the FE lenses. And my bag is actually continuing to get lighter because Sony is advancing their technology, allowing me forcing me not to have so many different bodies because I shoot such a variety of different topics. So for me, this setup is actually nice because I actually shaved probably about 2.5, 3 pounds off my camera bag because I'm essentially combining all these body strengths into one.
We just got a Facebook message from your chiropractor, and he would like you to start shooting medium format. Dan, how do you feel about your camera bag in this new camera?
Yeah, I mean, something that I concluded at the end of my video review, which was that if I could only have one camera in my bag, this would be it. And the reason is, it didn't matter what I was going to be shooting. I knew that this camera could handle it, whether I was going to be doing video or photos or landscape or portraits. I mean, virtually everything. It was up to the challenge of. And so my other camera systems, while they were good at certain things, they had weaknesses in other areas. And I would say that this is the first photography camera that didn't have huge weaknesses in video, or a video camera that doesn't have weaknesses in photo. And that's why even doing photography or video, we can both talk about the same camera with such high accolades and not have to say, oh, but it was weak for me because it didn't have this or didn't have that. Everything that was in the A7S, which has a huge video following, is in this camera and then some. I mean, nothing was left out.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I have a question specifically for you. This is from Facebook as well. Christopher Stoffel asked this question. For a filmmaker that often shoots documentaries away from the comfort of a studio, what advantages does the A7R Mark II provide over the A7S other than 4K video? And just to set the ground for this one, the A7S 12 megapixel 2K video.
No, it shoots 4K.
It is 4K.
4K, but not
internal.
internal.
So you have to use
Right.
an external recorder, which could be upwards of $2,000.
More-
So a much larger file, or much larger, you have to carry an additional recorder. So yeah, so 4K isn't everything. We do have image stabilization, which is going to allow you to do a lot of things that you weren't allowed to do before. We do have nicer viewfinders on this one. There's a couple little things that are just improved on it. But, you know, I hear people say 4K and kind of write it off because they don't want to shoot in 4K. But I'm going to tell you, when I first did 4K, I still don't master out in 4K, but I master out to 1080p. But having that image allows me to crop. It allows me to recompose in post. I can do external movements and stabilization in post. I mean, just because you're not printing 20 by 30s doesn't mean you need a 4 megapixel camera. That ability, the detail that's in a 4K image or trying to do masking on a 4K image is so much easier than a 1080p video feed. So there's so much more to 4K than just the ability to export 4K.
Well, I've also, one of the other Sony Artisans, and I unfortunately forget his name, did some interesting tests with the 4K video specifically, and being able to pull essentially screenshots out of the 4K video and to be able to do stuff with them, like being able to sell it and license the work, because the images that they can be so clean depending on how your setup is.
It's an 8 megapixel still.
Yeah, exactly.
What's wrong with that?
And that is, again, a game changer. And you were talking about the ability to kind of zoom in and crop in. Now, I don't do a ton of video work, but I do it occasionally, or I hire other people out for a lot of my marketing projects. And the ability to not have to carry, say, a dolly to be able to make some of the dynamic movements is huge. And again, it's weight saving, and it's a feature that makes our lives easier.
Kenta, what about taking stills out of the 4K video? Is this could potentially be a direction for
Oh
all?
yeah, I think it is. More and more photographers are transitioning into video, and the vice versa is happening as well. So we definitely see a conversion coming along, and I think this camera body kind of embodies that conversion nature that's happening. So I think you were talking about Jeff Berlin, probably.
Yeah,
right?
Jeff Berlin. Yes, that's right.
He shoots 4K video. His settings are interesting though. He sets it so that he knows he's going to be pulling images, so he's setting it to like a 60th of a second instead of 24 frames. And then he's taking it as if he shot a 60th of a second, but in 60 frames in 1 second. So it just opens up a whole new opportunity.
It does. It really does. That's actually kind of scary. All right. So other high-resolution cameras that are out there, how does this compare to outside of the Sony family? We've compared it against the Sony a7S and a7 II, but how does it compare to other offerings that are out there?
Well, if you look at the main competition for anything above 36 megapixels, let's say, you really only have a handful of competing options. You have your medium format options, where you have like Phase 1 and those guys. Those are big Holcomb cameras. They take beautiful images, but they're not exactly portable. You also have your Canon 5D SR, which is 50 megapixels. But as we talked about, there's definitely differences in sensors and the different features that you get out of it. And so the versatility of what Sony did with this, as Kenta explained, jumping up to 42 from 36, but not going up to 50, allowed it to have more dynamic range and added to have some of these other features that you really just can't get in any of the other bodies, regardless of size and portability.
Interesting. Just want to also remind our viewers out there about our social media, and you're going to want to tweet hashtag BHPhotoLive, BHPhotoLive, if you have any questions. And then don't forget also to give a shout out to Sony's hashtag Sony Alpha, and that's going to be part of the big giveaway, which is actually going to be happening relatively soon. That's exciting.
We can't tell you what it is, though. It's pretty awesome.
You have to wait. All right. Any other experiences that shooting with the camera, especially last week, that you picked up from it?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention is the lenses, right? Yeah. Very important component of the overall picture-taking experience. But a lot of people criticize that we started a new FE mount, and there were not enough lenses, right? But now we're at a point where the lens lineup is becoming more mature. But we do now have an advantage because since it's such a new FE mount, it's such a new mount, we knew that we were going to be making high-resolution cameras. So we made the lenses all resolve very high-resolution image sensors. So you don't have to worry about if this lens can resolve a 48 megapixel image or not. You don't have to think about that. So
yeah, all the results that I had were impressive across the board.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the entire lens lineup, it's interesting because photographers initially had that complaint where it was like, okay, Sony has this new system. Now, what lenses do I need, or what lenses can I use?
Right.
And with the entire lens lineup, if you actually look at them and like have comparisons when you go to like lens rentals or anything else to kind of look at look at people that review the lenses, or DxO to look at the ratings. The Sony native FE lineup, for the most part, is on par, if not better, than almost all of the competition out there. And so being able to take advantage of the primes or the zooms, especially with the resolution that you get with the 42 megapixel, is actually quite astounding. And I was blown away from everything from corner sharpness to all sorts of other things where people were like, oh, it's 42 megapixels, how is it going to resolve in the corners? I've had actually wonderful results, which was quite surprising. I was expecting to be a trade-off, but there really wasn't.
We have another video that's queued up. Let's run that video. pretty amazing.
Yeah, so, and by the way, that video is available to download in 4K without any kind of compression on it, so take a look at that.
I noticed the movement on it, that horizontal movement was pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the footage is amazing, and dynamic range is great out of it.
Well, we didn't get to talk about it before, but the native ISO for the A7R2 as a difference between the A7S, which we didn't talk about a second ago,
Right.
is quite drastic. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah,
touch on that.
800 ISO now. So when we're using S-Log2, we can have that at 800 ISO and up, whereas previously it was much higher than that. So now, with just my standard ND filters, variable ND filters, I was capable of going out and doing that. Whereas before I had to stack in order to do S-Log2 in a bright light, because I had to shoot at such high ISO. Now I can shoot at 800, which is very manageable outside in daylight as long as you have some ND filters.
All right. So I got a couple of Twitter questions for us. This is coming from at Taki Tasonis. Could you clarify exactly how weatherproof the A7R Mark II is? Can you take photos in the rain?
We always get this question.
Reminds me of a song.
So what we say is dust and moisture proof. And probably the weakest link in the overall system is the lens mount. But I kind of defer it to the real pros because I know you use it in really harsh conditions, right?
Yeah, I've, compared to most photographers, probably 98% will say, I typically use my cameras in more extreme environments than most people. So last year we're talking about negative 50-degree weather in the Arctic to crazy humidity to under waterfalls in Iceland. And I've used my entire Sony lineup, including the A7 II, which has a similar body style. So I haven't tested the A7R2 in all these. But I've had wonderful results. And, I have yet to have an issue aside from one caveat, and that was when it was negative 50 degrees and I was up in the Canadian Rockies. At one point, after about 45 minutes of shooting, the rear LCD, a corner of it started to freeze, and I essentially had to get back in the car. And that was specifically the only reason that happened is because there's an articulating screen. So the articulating screen comes out, which means that there's another place where it can get cold, and so essentially it allows it to get more cold than a standard body that doesn't have that screen that can come out.
Colby, you were negative 50 degrees.
Negative 50. I have images, but I don't have them here, of like my eyes frozen. And yeah, no, it was wonderful photos. I love shooting in the Arctic, but yeah, no.
It's a little extreme.
For sure. I mean, long story short, it definitely, as Kenta said, they're weather resistant. They can handle it, but I haven't had any issues. I feel confident using my gear, my Sony gear, including the A7R2, in almost any situation for the most part.
Dan, how cold is your studio again?
Not that cold. Hopefully not below 60. But I've had some mild rain on it, and it didn't affect it at all.
Using a weatherproof camera, I think having a little rain or mist and just not being conscious of having to take care of your expensive camera.
For sure.
That's the benefit there. It's just, yes, it's an advantage to shoot in these environments and whatnot, but even if you don't find yourself in normal circumstances there, that one or two times that you got it over your shoulder,
it's not a big deal.
And it's not a big deal.
Right.
And it's just like you don't have to worry about it.
The only caveat I would say is definitely salt water, and that's with all electronics. Is just if you're working near seascapes, protect your camera. Even when I'm doing it, I see a big wave coming, I'm grabbing my camera and I'm lifting it up. But outside of salt water, just because it corrodes the electronic connections, pretty much anything else, I'm not worried about. So.
Okay, so I've got a question from Peter Walker BKK. Peter Walker BKK. Will we see lossless RAW in the Sony A7R II when, or is that not a possibility?
Never thought this was going to come. No one ever asked this question.
So we monitor, all the social media outlets. We read a lot of the reviews, and we totally understand the concern. I'm still talking with HQ. I can't say for sure anything because we can't talk about future products and future announcements, but we are totally aware and we understand your concern. So that's the best.
Will this show up on an A7R Mark III or possibly with a firmware update?
I can't say.
Pushing the lion's den, my
There we
friend.
go. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
you know that your NDA became invalid the moment you sat at B&H Photos. Okay, you can.
Well, it's an interesting question, and again, I get this a lot because I have a large social following that focuses around photo education, and I definitely see this question come up a lot. It comes up in my reviews, comes up in especially in the message forums. You go into the deep depths of DP review in those places, and these questions are there.
Oh yeah.
The truth is that the idea of lossless RAW is important. Like, yes, of course, as photographers, you want the most amount of image data. That being said, I've never had a single client complain about any of this. I haven't seen any of the artifacting that has been caused by any of this stuff. And at the same time, the image sizes are actually more manageable because there is a slight compression. So if you actually think about the comparison to like the 50 megapixel lossless RAW from the 5DSR, like those are massive sizes. And if you actually look at the comparison of the details, you're not going to see the difference. Your average or your pro photographer is not going to see any difference. So I personally, sure, if lossless RAW comes out, I'm going to update my firmware. I'm going to use it, but I don't really see any difference between what I'm doing. And I tell the same response to every photographer that asks the question is, will it come? Probably. Will it matter? Probably not. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of banding or anything like that can happen, artifacting.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I would like it as well, but I haven't seen enough to make me say, oh, this is an issue or something.
Yeah.
I'll probably be cursed in these same forums that you're talking about, but I'm a JPEG man. Okay?
Don't hold it against me.
Don't hold it against me. I like my JPEGs. I like having to not worry about it. And I printed books in really large prints. JPEG. They look pretty darn good. So yeah.
Well, it's a pixel peeping generation that we have, and it's again it's important. It's a 42 megapixel camera. I understand people again want to focus on it, but at the end of the day, I probably can almost guarantee that you're not going to see too much of a difference between the two.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peter Walker, we're gonna wait on that, and then when it finally comes around, it's not really gonna matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a big one. This is from Aiden Bahardi, and it's how does the low light performance compare to the A7S as the original A7R?
I'll take it.
Yeah, when you're at lower ISOs, there's very little difference. There is a difference above 6400 ISO.
Yeah. Pretty different. Pretty big.
Yes. Yeah, the A7S holds on a lot longer than the A7R Mark II.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been able to shoot with my A7S upwards of some 10,000 and even 25,000 ISO and still get pretty amazing results. It's a 12 megapixel image, but it's pretty phenomenal. Where with the A7R II, my personal limitation is going to be more of the 3200 to 6400, which is still a step above the first generation A7R. But with the S, that is it's hard to compete against that awesomeness of the A7S, which is really the low light king, the dark knight, so to speak, of the photo industry.
See beyond human vision.
Yeah.
Now for photos though, when you're shooting with a 42 megapixel picture, you do have options that you don't with a 12. So you can actually downscale that and get rid of some of that. You can apply more noise reduction, still have a lot of that detail remaining. So you're gonna need to use noise reduction a little bit sooner, but you can use it and still end up with a very similar looking image to what you would on the A7S.
Great point.
Up till another stop or two probably.
Yeah, the great chef Mario Batali says if it's good going in the oven, it's going to be good coming out of the oven.
Yeah.
You're just starting off with such good ingredients to begin with.
For sure.
After you process it, you're negligible.
Yeah.
This is a really good question, and I noticed this one last weekend, and something that I struggle with. This is from Elias Campbell. And how does the battery life compare to the A7S, and what kind of SD cards are recommended? So I think the battery life across the A7 lineup is
About 300 to 350 shots, but in real life situations, people have been shooting, they could shoot more.
450
Or
at times,
450,
depending on how much you use it, how much you turn off the LCD. I personally found for stills specifically, getting about 30-ish, 30 to 35 extra images out of this compared to the first generation A7R, which is quite nice. A nice surprising feature, especially since it has 5-axis image stabilization. Of course, everyone's traction is going to vary. But yeah, that was definitely a nice touch. And the benefit of this, as we all know since we've seen the cameras, is that the A7R II comes with 2 batteries.
Yes.
So compared to only the one of the first, you actually get 2. And because these cameras can actually be charged by USB, plugging into the direct camera as well as the external charger that you get, it's very easy to keep them both charged, or of course buy more and make sure you're on top of it.
I think the answer, buy more. I mean, not to sound like a B&H salesperson, but the thing about these cameras is that when the battery dies, you are done.
Yeah, it's not,
You may as well pack up. It's
For
not
sure.
There's no X-Sync or something.
Yeah, I used it in that configuration there with the battery grip, and that gave me a lot of comfort and peace of mind. While I normally only went through one battery in the day, I had the second one there, and it only drains the outside battery first. So when you get home at the end of the day, you haven't touched that inside one. It still is 100%. So you pop out that last one, pop in a brand new one, and
That's
you're ready to
great.
go with 2 brand new batteries. And for the memory cards, you do have to use U3 cards
Right.
in order to do
4K
4K recording.
4K videos.
Yeah, so you can do the lower end ones without it, but that one. Now, I did find myself out without one of those cards, and I did record still in 4K using 60 megabits per second, and it did actually record it without an issue. It didn't play it back in camera, but it did actually record it, but U3 cards are the way to go.
U3
Right.
cards, okay.
And then one more thing I wanted to add with the USB thing, it was that
Oh yeah.
yeah,
It is huge.
you can now. So we have USB chargers for smartphones, right? Now you can actually plug one in and actually run it
While the
camera's on.
That is huge. So you can use this, like, so another benefit that I don't think we talked about, but you can run camera apps on these bodies.
Yes.
And one of the most popular by far is running time-lapse. And so there's a time-lapse apps that helps you not only set up time-lapse, but also compile it for you, maintain your raw files, which is pretty awesome. The downside was that, again, a mirrorless body, you're smaller than digital SLR, means you have smaller space for batteries, which means they have smaller MAH in terms of battery power. So
Yeah.
they don't stay as charged as long. And so being able to charge it externally now, which is again a first, before when you plugged it in, it would go into USB mode, and essentially your camera would be rendered useless. I'd always charge mine in my bag, but I couldn't use it when I was doing a long time lapse. Now you have the ability to plug it in. You can buy a power brick from B&H. You can get one wherever, and essentially have a power brick that can recharge your Sony battery 3, 5. I have a big one that charges 18 of them. It's quite hefty, but essentially having that with me and being able to charge stuff while I'm shooting means that the long shooting times are no longer an issue.
You know, that's like a small thing, but actually a big thing.
It's
if you
huge.
think about it.
For a
huge.
specific niche
Yeah.
of people that do that type of
huge.
stuff, that's game changing. Because before you get 350 images, and then you got to change batteries, and that's annoying. Not only, but you again have to pop it back in, and then you have to jump back into the time lapse app and start it again. You miss a couple scenes or a couple frames.
Even just for travel photography, as a traveler, usually if you're working with your mobile phone, you're going to have one of those portable chargers.
Exactly,
with you.
micro USB for sure.
And it came with one as well.
Yeah, exactly. And well, what I do with my travel stuff is I go to places like Iceland and Chile and Patagonia. Is I'll have a long shooting day. I'll put my camera in my bag. I'll turn it to its side. I'll plug in one of my power bricks. Zip up my bag because I'm hiking to my next location, or maybe I'm done for the day and I still got to drive home for an hour or to my hotel. And it's going to charge my battery inside the bag through the camera. I don't have to think about it. I get home, I unplug it, and then I'm done.
Was that you that came up with that idea?
I wish I did, but
We appreciate that.
well,
Okay, this is a question from Twitter. This is RK Aviation, and it's what's the buffer size for A7R2 when shooting continuously with RAW?
it's about I'll have to double check on the specs, but it's about 20 to 25 images.
Yeah, that's what I got.
So
It's like a roll of 24 exposure film.
Well,
pretty much.
when my experience is what I've done is I found it about 23 to 25, the same thing. But when I was doing it, essentially you'll hit that buffer wall, and then it won't stop. You'll continue to shoot, but it's going to slow down to maybe one image every 0.7 seconds until the buffer is cleared. In which case, then it will speed. You'll be able to keep shooting. But it's not where you're shooting and all of a sudden it's like you can't do anything with it. Which is an interesting thing when it comes to it, because again, this is not necessarily a sports camera. You can shoot sports and wildlife with it, but if you're shooting tons of frames per second, you're not going to get to that point where it's not going to take the shot. It's just going to slow down your frames per second, and then kind of go from there. So
It's a good safety net.
yeah.
I think we answered this one before, but this is from Harrison Klein. And are there downsides to using the silent shutter mode, rolling shutter in particular?
Yeah, so we talked about the 14-bit going to 12-bit, and also we don't 100% guarantee the image quality. So there are, under certain lighting conditions, that might not work well. We're reading off the sensor so quickly, but it's not quick enough, right, for some situations. So there might be some image distortion. So that's why we say, we don't 100% guarantee. If image quality is really, really important in that situation, just put on the mechanical shutter. We reduce the vibration and the sound of it, so it's
quiet.
very, very quiet.
Right.
So it should not be a problem. So.
Did you have any? I mean, with specifically with rolling shutter, which I think they combine this together. But if I'm not mistaken, from what I've seen, from what I've shot, the rolling shutter is actually much better now with the A7R2.
Yeah, it seems to be a faster read. So I did a test with video, and it was usable.
Yeah.
I didn't have the issues that were as bad.
Right.
I thought it was manageable.
Yeah.
It's something we're going to deal with until there's a global shutter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the sensor now
Wink.
is reading.
Wink.
The sensor now is reading about 3.5 times faster than its predecessor, so it's much faster, and it's combating those kind of effects.
Nice.
Okay, we have time for 2 more Twitter questions.
Okay.
They're going to be coming up. And how is the audio quality when plugging in mics? Can we disable auto gain control?
So in my full review, if you go check it out, I had a mic plugged in straight into that, so my lab mic was plugged into there, so you can listen to it. It's a lower floor noise than my 5D3 from anything I could tell. I mean, it's not going to replace your good audio recorder, but I didn't hear anything really bad on the noise floor.
Yeah. You do have a couple other options as well. You can use the mic. We also sell an XLR accessory, which plugs in directly into the hot shoe.
Right.
And the hot shoe is a little bit interesting because it does have contacts in it. So you can feed the audio straight into the video file, which is really nice. And it does have an option of attaching 2 XLRs. So if you're in an interview situation where you have one boom and also maybe a microphone attached to the interviewer, that's another situation where you can have really high quality audio.
Does these, I'm going to call it a smart shoe.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah. Patent that.
Yeah, we're not patent that one. Using Pocket Wizard or Photix or any of the remote strobe radio slaves, does it fit everything okay on
It
top?
should
just
fit.
goes right in?
I have heard some incompatibility, but most of the times it's not just you have to jam it all the way in, so the
jam it.
contacts actually
Or
hit
at the front.
hit the.
Be careful you don't
center
void
point.
your Sony warranty by doing that. Is there a PC socket on the camera?
Not a PC socket, but you can get an accessory
go
for
up
that.
on top.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. All right.
Cool.
I think we have one more question from Twitter. All right. Will you be able to record 4K externally at 422 10-bit signal? Dan?
The answer to my knowledge is yes, right?
422 8-bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is the same as the A7S.
Right. Correct. So internally, it's doing 420 8-bit.
Yes.
Through the HDMI, it does 422 8-bit.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
And then I encourage everybody to look at the 4K video quality, right? Because a lot of people, they look at the specs and it's like, I can't use it because it's not 10-bit. You know, please look at the resultant image file because I think that would change your view of all these specs.
Right.
Specs are one thing, and result is
Real
another
world
thing.
is another
Right.
thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're trying to do green screen work and you're shooting in 4K, it's much easier to mask. You might not need that 10-bit that you used to think you needed to get that color depth.
Yeah.
You might not need it anymore because now you have so many more pixels to be able to see it with.
Okay, our producer told us that we actually have one more Twitter question, a real important one.
Ooh. Is it?
And here it comes.
Oh.
And it's been untweeted. Untweeted. It's been retro-tweeted. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right. We're coming near the end. Gentlemen, any specific things that you want to cover on the camera that we haven't talked about yet?
So you kind of alluded to this earlier, that it seems like we're in a technology race more than a photo race. And this camera, the new technology doesn't necessarily allow you to better pictures are now going to be possible. It allows you to get those better pictures in a much wider variety of environments. So we now have the ability to shoot at 6400 ISO and still get good images, whereas on your older cameras, that would not have been possible before. And so, yes, great photographs were taken on cameras that were 10 years old. They're 10 years old now, and they're still one of the best photographs that you'll ever see. But the ability to do that in such a light, ergonomic, portable, and with the ISO capabilities that we're able to do right now, that previously was not possible. On the video side, it is new. You could not do what you're doing right now on some of the older cameras because of the 4K resolution, because of the better dynamic range, the S-Log2, things like that. But on the photo side, it just allows you to do that in more places, and it allows you to do it much easier than you were able to do it before.
For sure. Well, and from the photography side, again, you know, the fact that the technology found here is the culmination of the past few years of experience and the planning, the roadmap for Sony to sit there and say, okay, we have these specific specialty models that excel at certain things, and then combine them into one. It just makes our lives as creators easier. And again, they're tools. These aren't, buying a A7R2 isn't going to make you a better photographer. Like that, it just doesn't happen that way. You still need, you need to understand the fine aspects of the art form. But that being said, just to reiterate, Daniel said the tools that you can put into this single body that embody all of the other different lines of the Sony camera, for me, makes my life immensely easier as a professional. I don't want to, I enjoyed using all the different bodies of the A7 before, but being able to, again, lighten my load and put them together, ISO sensitivity, autofocus, better EVF, all these things were a really pleasant surprise to what I consider the most monumental upgrade camera that Sony has come out with, is the A7R2, in my personal opinion.
Kenta, tell the boys back in the factory that they done good.
Yes, we need to build more factories. But yeah, it's such a great camera, and from a manufacturer's side, it's such a great time to be in digital imaging, because not only is this A7R Mark II such a great camera, we have other cameras like the RX10 Mark II, the RX100 Mark IV. We're constantly pushing the edge, whether it be an interchangeable lens camera or these fixed lens cameras. We want to really excite the photographers and the videographers.
I think you're definitely doing it. There's a
Yes.
lot of excitement. It's refreshing, actually, to see a new kid on the block that's really rocking.
Well, it's pushing the boundaries. Competition is good for everyone. I think as
Right.
consumers, that's what we want.
So we got our Twitter. We got our Twitter back online.
Okay.
And it's what is the minimum ISO for S-Log?
Yep, 800. Much more workable. Things look much better there.
With A7S, it was 3200,
Yes.
which is, 2 stops different.
Could
which
you
is quite
elaborate
great.
on us JPEG shooting photographers? What's up with S-Log? What is the S-Log?
Okay, so S-Log, it gets really complicated, so I won't go into that, but it basically gives you more stops than you could get, and it combines them into a smaller format, pushes it out, and then in the editing process you can apply a loop or something like that to bring it, expand it back out, and have more dynamic range to work with.
So it's like a JPEG video.
Well, it's kind of more of like a
It's
raw.
a dangerous comment. Dangerous
Yeah, I
comparison.
guess
It would be a little more
Video guys are
cinematic
like,
raw. Whereas your compressed video file would be a JPEG. This is a little bit closer to being able to shoot raw.
Okay.
Gives you a little more latitude to work with in post.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, we're wrapping up, and let's go over our hashtag Sony Alpha, and let you know what the giveaway is on that Sony hashtag Alpha.
So I am going to call, and I will actually leave the voicemail for your voicemail machine. That's going to be the prize. We're not going to give away anything else. So I will just call home and I will tell you. Does that work? Is that good enough?
I have an old Sony recording message.
Yeah.
I have to record on a little tape, a little micro cassette. So
Let's do that.
I can hand you the micro.
Well, let's go with the
record.
second option then, I
Okay,
guess.
So the second, no, you won't be winning a Colby voicemail. You'll be winning a Sony A7R Mark II.
Unless,
cool,
unless
huh?
one of us walk out with it.
Well, this is Daniel's.
So,
Okay, so you want to do hashtag tweet in as few characters as you possibly can to hashtag Sony Alpha, and let us know what your dreams of the Sony A7R Mark II is, and you'll be able to win that. Are we giving that away now? No, we're not giving away now. That'll be post. Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us out there in the internet land, and our wonderful panelists here. And you came all the way from Colorado. You came from Florida. You came from
San Diego.
California, San Diego, and
he came from down the street.
I came from down the street. Right. I came from down the street. But it's been wonderful, and I think this is actually all joking aside, all hype aside.
Right.
This camera actually is something that's pretty special, and let's thank Sony for putting this together and pushing the envelope, because let's face it, if you guys push the envelope, the other guys are going to have to push it too. So this is great for the whole industry, and
Absolutely.
things are just getting more and more interesting.
For sure.
Right.
All right, thank you very much for coming and stopping by to B&H Photo Live, and look forward to upcoming and new cameras and technology from B&H Photo. Thank you very much.